Hello, everyone. Welcome to Understanding the Entrepreneurial Journey within CEA. To introduce ourselves, my name is Jeffrey Landau. I am the Director of Business Development for here at Agritecture. I've been with the firm almost 8 years now, a background in mechanical engineering, and do a majority of our business development, project management, and support of consulting work with our clients around the world. David?
Hi, everyone. My name is David Caesar. I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area. I've been working with Agritecture for about 7 years. I'm the lead agronomist. I work sort of a combination of things. I work very closely with our consulting clients on the technical side of things, helping them to choose crops and to improve the crops they're growing. And I also work with our Agritecture Designer software to help do some of the logic that shows the results. So anyhow, nice to meet everyone.
All right, well, we're going to dive in. So the agenda today is really to help guide, entrepreneurs on with their first steps within CEA. So what steps should you take to start this journey? And then how can Agritecture Designer best support you, in this process? So we're very excited to kind of share our findings and learnings over the last couple of years of consulting, and we hope that this information helps give you a better sense of which direction to go, and how to really decide, what farm to build, what crops to consider, and to go from there. So really, our goals are to help you understand the importance of proper planning, how to make key decisions, avoid expensive mistakes, build connections. Your goals could vary. It could be from starting a farm to save water to reduce food miles. These goals do impact how you'll want to plan and build your farm. And we're here to kind of walk you through what that process looks like.
One other goal we have for today is that this webinar is sponsored by Indoor AgCon, so we will be giving a discount code at the end of the webinar for those folks who are in attendance. It's a great conference, happens every spring in Las Vegas. So anyhow, just it's another thing that's happening today.
So we're going to be referencing Agritecture Designer throughout the conversation of this webinar. These are some screenshots of what this platform looks like. You can do your financial overview. You can have an operating summary built out. You can adjust your crop pricing. David's really going to explain a bit more of that as we proceed, but really just want to give you a showcase of what this looks like as we go through the webinar itself. So we're going to start with kind of our methodology. So what are the order of operations to guide you through the CEA journey? And this is really how we believe it is best to move forward as you look to build out your operation. You need to understand your objectives. Are you looking to have environmental impact, a local food production impact? Are you looking to target certain customers, whether it might be direct to consumer, grocery retail, wholesale? These objectives are pretty critical early on because it's going to help define the rest of the stages as you move through this process. So the concept is number one. Once you understand who your customer you want to target is, you need to understand the market that's in. So what products are they purchasing? What price points are they purchasing at? What crops are they looking to purchase? Because that will help decide what crops you should focus on for your market in the area you might be growing at. From there, we go into looking at your system, technology, and structures. So based on the customer type and based on the crops you want to grow, what are the right systems to use to accomplish that? There are a variety of vendors in the CEA industry that sell turnkey systems, that sell specific equipment components to different systems. So understanding your goals from the get-go will help you determine who's the best vendor to work with, or multiple vendors to work with. And with that, we kind of go into assessing your financials. So based on the systems you want to use, you could use Agritecture Designer to do some financial projections, do some economic modeling, really understand, is this the right vendor for these crops? Is this the right price point? Is this the right methodology? to then understand how you can retweak and edit your final projection, your model. That way, you know what model you want to build. So when you go to do your supplier outreach and your equipment selection, you already have the basics determined and you can be better informed and ask better questions to the supplier you might be working with. And later on, you can go into financing, look at our financing partners and how they might be able to assist you. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. We'll be sure to cover them. What we want to do is kind of answer questions that we get most commonly asked so that you guys have a better sense of how to approach this. So I'm going to turn over to David for the first one, and it's going to be, what should I grow? David.
Thanks, Jeffrey. So when you're thinking, so this is, essentially the most common question we get asked by entrepreneurs who are starting this journey into CEA or in agriculture in general. So when you think about what you should grow, it really begins with your market research, right? And Agritecture Designer has some tools on the platform to help you conduct your market research. The first part is as when you're on our platform, you'll see we have an entire video series which covers all different aspects of CEA. And one of those specifically is about understanding your market and choosing your crops, right? So that's your first step. And then we also have part of our software, a market research tool that helps you conduct and record the information you do and you get in your market research. So many people come to CEA, they say, I want to grow tomatoes, I want to grow spearmint, I want to grow cannabis, I want to grow this or that, right? But they don't have a really good understanding of their market, right? And when we talk about market research, it's not only about what crop you should grow, it's about what volumes it needs to be grown in, it's about how should it be, what is the appropriate retail size it should have, etc. Can you go back one slide, Jeffrey? The other thing is that's critical to think about when you're determining what crop to grow is the grower experience, right? If you're new to this arena, if you're new to CEA and you want to do a small operation and you want to be the grower, right? It's critical that you begin growing something that aligns with your skill set, right? So for example, if you want to grow leafy greens or microgreens and you're a brand new grower, right, you may focus on microgreens at the beginning. If you're a more experienced grower, you may focus on something that's a little more challenging, such as some varieties of lettuce. So really think about those two things, understanding your market in a complex manner and the level of grower experience for who's going to be managing this operation. Okay, next slide, please. Another really common question we get is, what market makes the most sense for the crop I want to grow? Okay, so this is a critical question as well. And there's two kind of important ways you need to think about this question. First is let's say you decide, okay, I want to grow spearmint, for example, right? The market that you're going to choose to sell your crops in needs to align with several things of your operation, right? So for example, if you want to focus on a supermarket consumer with a large volume, right? At the beginning of your project, you need to be thinking, okay, how large a facility do I need to have to grow enough spearmint to meet their volume requirements, right? And do I have the CapEx that's required to set up that type of facility, right? On the other hand, if you're looking for a very small type of production facility, let's say you want to be growing and just selling at a local farmer's market or direct to consumer in your neighborhood or in your city, right? The volume of production that you're going to need might be much less. The CapEx for your operation will likely be much less. And so it's just important that when you think about both of these factors, that they really align, right? The other thing to consider is OpEx considerations. Many vertical farms in urban areas, it's expensive to operate a vertical farm, and it can often be very expensive in urban areas, right? The cost of real estate is expensive. The cost of energy may be very expensive. The cost of labor may also be very expensive. So if you look at the sort of like graph on the right of the screen, you'll see that often, especially in vertical farms, labor and electricity costs are two of the major costs in CEA, and especially in vertical farming. They may be, 60% or more of your expenses, of your operating expenses. So finding a location that's where energy may be a few cents cheaper, where labor may be a little bit cheaper, or rent, et cetera, can make a big difference in the profitability of your operation. When you model in Agritecture Designer, which I'll show you later on, it does make assumptions about the cost of these critical items, the cost of water, the cost of electricity, the cost of labor. But it's really critical that you understand what the costs are in your specific location, in your specific scenario, so that you can update these appropriately in the software. Next slide, please. Okay, another very common question we get is, what cultivation system should I use? And we have a great module in our software on this by Javid, who's our lead systems design and also our director of consulting. So I encourage you to watch all these videos. But what's critical is that you do your market research first, you select a crop, and then you work from there to choose the production system and technology that aligns best with that crop and your budget. So you don't want to choose your technology system first and then try and find a crop that fits with that. It's really all about conducting your market research, finding a crop that's going to be economically viable, and then from there, choosing the right system to support that crop. And that system, there's not going to be one right or wrong answer. It's going to depend on a lot of variables. It's going to depend on your budget. It's going to depend on your climate. It's going to depend on if you're in a vertical farm or a greenhouse. It's going to depend on your grower's experience. If you have a grower already and they're very comfortable with a certain system, you're probably going to have much better results using that system than a different type of system. Another great thing to do is window shopping. And when I say window shopping, it means go to conferences, go to Indoor AgCon, go to Cultivate, go to the different industry conferences and just look at the equipment that's on display, talk with the vendors, get as much information you can about production systems, crops, and what folks will recommend. Next slide, please. Another extremely common question that we get are, what are my costs of production? And as mentioned before, OpEx can vary based on many different factors. OpEx, especially in CEA, is highly dependent, as I mentioned, on cost of labor, cost of energy, cost of your consumables, and your crop type can also greatly influence your cost of production. So for example, if you're growing a crop like microgreens, which has a very short production cycle, versus a crop like lettuce. So microgreens might have a 7 to 10 day crop cycle versus lettuce, which will have a longer crop cycle, maybe around 24, 28 days, right? Some of the OpEx costs that will vary just based on your crop selection are the amount of harvest labor you'll be required for, the amount of packaging you'll need, the labor to the packaging labor you'll need, the distribution labor, all these types of things. So crop type and its cycle can have a big influence on your OpEx, as well as the farm location, right? If you're growing in a greenhouse in California versus a greenhouse in Canada, or in Cleveland, Ohio. In Cleveland, you're in the winter, right? You're going to have very high heating costs. So your natural gas expenses are going to be much higher than in California during the winter. So taking into account the local climate is critical. Next slide, please. And Agritecture Designer helps you to understand what are those costs of production. So for example, as we'll show later on in the demo, but here Agritecture Designer breaks out your costs by all your OpEx costs by category. We estimate them as best we can based on the model you build. And we'll even break down the costs within the category. So as you can see, the energy costs or the electricity costs are broken down by lighting, HVAC, pumps, nursery, etc. So we think that understanding your cost of production is critical, and Agritecture Designer is a good way that you can help understand these costs. Next slide, please. Okay, so the final question that we're going to talk about today, but one that we often get asked very early in the process is, what will be the yield and revenue from my farm? And these two things are really key to understand. And the answer you'll find in your market research. So when you conduct your market research, when you figure out, what unit size I'm going to be selling in, what's a realistic price, what's a realistic volume that I need to produce. And that in combination with Agritecture Designer can help you understand your yield and revenue. So next slide, please. So Agritecture Designer will produce for you a 15-year operating summary. So you can see, I'm not sure this is from one of the models that I built, but you can see it gives you a yield by yield or a yield by year. So this is a variety of lettuce. And you'll see that, so it gives you the yield, it gives you the crop yield by crop. So if you have multiple crops, it will display by crop type, and also shows you the amount of wastage. Wastage is the percentage of the crop that is unsaleable for whatever reason. We find that many entrepreneurs who are getting into this field tend to underestimate the wastage. And so these are the assumptions we use. This assumption will vary based on the model you produce, the location, the experience of your head grower, the number of crops, things like that. But it's a very critical thing to understand in your business model. Next slide.
So now we're going to go into the most common mistakes we see within the industry. And this is to give you all, another perspective as to how to consider your operation and how to consider building your business as you do more and more research. So, the first one we see is going too big, too fast. Especially without experience, you want to go slow and steady and understand, the business you're building at a small scale first. So you want to experiment, you want to learn, iterate from those mistakes. And you also want to engage customers, and they want to see the product, they want to see the samples. But starting small gives you a good starting point to grow some product, to understand the growing process, to sample product to potential customers, without going all in on, a multi-million-dollar operation. So somewhere between 500 to 1,000 square feet for a vertical farm could be plenty to pilot for your first operation, especially if this is your first time doing it.
Yeah, we really encourage folks to set up a pilot farm. It's a great way to, test different types of production systems, test different crop varieties. Even if you're decided on a specific variety, there's all sorts of, seed vendors. So you might the seed quality from different vendors might, in some cases, might be great. From other vendors, might not meet your expectations. So there's really a ton of different factors that you need to dial in for your operation. And so setting up a pilot is a critical first step that we recommend at Agritecture.
Second one we see is, the obsession with technology innovation rather than the market needs. And, this is an ongoing critique, and I would say debate we've seen in the industry. Are you a farmer or are you a technology provider? Because those are two very different things. And it's pretty important, especially to your business model and to your bottom line, that if you're a farmer, you're selling a food product, not the technology. And that will have direct implications on how you operate your business, how you run your business, and how you try to build your business. So it's very important to understand who you are from the get-go, what you're trying to do, because that will influence how the business operates. Anything else to add to that, David?
Yeah, folks would be surprised about how many folks kind of start out in this business saying they want to farm, and then kind of partially through they pivot saying, oh, I'm gonna, I've created this great technology and I want to, begin to sell it. So they pivot somewhere along their journey of setting up their farm, operating their farm, and it creates a business plan it sort of like deviates from their business plan and usually ends up not working out very well.
I think
Yeah,
I
go
think
ahead,
one thing
Jeff.
to add to that, in other countries, vertical farms are called plant factories. And a good way to think about this is that, you are building a factory and the product are the plants. You want to build a highly efficient, optimized factory that grows plants. And you want to choose the right technology that can help you do that. Doesn't matter what kind of technology, as long as it's getting you to the bottom line that you need to, grow efficiently, effectively to meet, the volume needs that you are selling to your customers at.
And the second point on here, per our CEA census that we conducted in years past, a high percentage of CE operators would choose different equipment or different crops if they could go back in time. And so that's really why it's so critical for you to set up a pilot operation, as we discussed in the last slide, right? You want to work out those kinks as early as possible in your journey, right? Any kinks that you can operate at the beginning will be money and time savings down the road. So setting up a pilot farm is critical to select the right equipment, select the right crops, and really have a successful journey in CEA.
The third mistake we see is this mismatch between scale and then target sales channels. So, understanding the size of your farm and the amount that it can produce will directly influence, who you can sell to and how much you can promise to them. What's critical here is the market research. If you're looking to target different grocery retail, what minimum value do they require to consider a contract? And is your farm able to produce that amount of volume for that customer? If it can, is it able to produce additional for other customers? Are you going to solely rely on one customer for your sales? That might be a risk. If that customer ends up backing out later down the line, you have no other backup. So understanding, the amount you can produce and who you can sell to and what volume they're going to request is pretty critical. And the way to understand this question is by doing the right market research, asking about volume and frequency of delivery needs, not just the price. David, anything you want to add to that?
Another thing I think is critical that a lot of folks may not think about is just the scale will not only determine, the differences in the amount of product you have to produce, but also who your customer is going to influence a lot about what roles you need to have at your farm. So if you're doing a very small operation, right, and you're selling at a farmer's market, as I mentioned before, some of the personnel, your personnel needs will be very small. Once you increase your sales volume, have a customer who's say a Safeway or a Whole Foods, they're going to have specific requirements that you're going to need to follow around food safety, around logistics, and so the personnel requirements that you're going to need to meet those requirements are going to be greater. So when you're thinking small farm versus large farm, it's not only a question of the volume of production, the size of the facility, the capex required, but it also requires additional OpEx, additional personnel to meet the responsibilities that a more maybe complex buyer will require of you.
The next one we see, is this assumption that VC money is a fit for any CA business. And while these businesses do need to raise money, VC money is not necessarily the right fit, for your business. And the point here is that there are other forms of financing to consider, not just the VC route. It could be project financing, it could be grants. If you're in the US, it could be USDA grants. There are revenue share and equity crowdfunding platforms if you are listed on Agritecture Designer, or even potentially talking to your bank, they are familiar with these types of operations. So, for small scale growers or first time growers, the VC route is most likely not the right route for you, but it's important to understand other financing options as you go to build your business. Yeah, and I think this third bullet, if you're not aiming to build, a $500 million plus business, you don't want to waste your time trying to chase VCs. It just is unlikely that you'll be able to secure that type of investment.
And based on your location, the cities, a lot of cities are really trying to encourage local agriculture and local production. So there may be opportunities in your local city through the local government as well. So make sure to explore those.
And then the last one is unrealistic growth expectations. So, when I talk to leads, they always want to build as soon as they can, grow as fast as they can, so they can get into the market, as fast as they can. And the thing with agriculture is that, it's a long and steady game, sometimes slow, and that you need to be realistic about the timeline and how fast you can realistically grow. So how long it takes to find your site, first off, then to prep the site, to engage with vendors, to get contracts and purchase orders secured, get the lead times on developing the equipment, to get it on site and commissioned. And then once it's commissioned, going through the actual growing process, which can take anywhere from, 10, 12 to 45 days, depending on the crop that you're looking to grow. So, we definitely emphasize slow and steady, and to be realistic about how quick you can get up and running and how quick you can go to market. So the point here is to be vigilant and conservative on your timelines.
It's also good, as we discussed before, start your pilot early, right? And a quick way to start a pilot is, using a shipping container type facility. While they are definitely expensive on a per area basis, it's a quick way to get started in CEA, to learn about different systems, to trial different crops. You can have a small amount of production. You could be producing samples that you can be giving to potential buyers. So that's a quick way to get your pilot up and running, and to get sort of this process moving, while these other steps, maybe building out a larger facility, takes more time.
Yeah. Just before we go into the demo, I see there's a question from Antoinette in the chat. How do you access buying or renting land where your business will be operating from? The best ways to do that would be to, work with a local real estate agent in your market to help secure available property. You may know someone that has available property and can try to negotiate directly with them. It depends on size and scale. Sometimes you're able to, use basement warehouse or other types of spaces that are not being used, just to get your pilot going. But, we would suggest a real estate agent, a local broker, or, asking around your network to see who has land available, for a potential operation.
One thing to remember when you're doing that is, when you're looking at properties to be used for CEA, you need to look at them through a whole different kind of lens than, you would look at regular properties. So a real estate agent will help you in locating properties, but they're not going to be able to help you to sort of evaluate them as far as terms in, how they will be used for CEA or if they'll be good locations. So as part of Agritecture Designer, I believe we do have a site selection document on Agritecture Designer, and this is just a list of the things that you should look out for when considering a facility for CEA operations. So I think, yeah, it's critical to understand, what questions to ask and what you should be looking for when considering a property or land for CEA.
So next we're going to go into a demo. And is this where I turn over to you, David?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to give a maybe about a 10-minute demo of Agritecture Designer, just to show you some of the stuff that we've mentioned so far, and then we'll open it up to questions. But in the meantime, feel free to post questions in the chat for sure, and we can pause and answer them as we're going. So let me share my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen, Jeffrey? And can you hear me?
I can hear you, and now I can see your screen.
Okay, awesome. So when you folks log on to Agritecture Designer, the first thing you'll see here is the dashboard. And the first thing we suggest for all our users is to visit the education section. So when you visit the education section, you'll see the different courses that we have. The first place to start is this commercial urban farming masterclass. This has 6 modules, which are about 2.5 hours of lessons. And these are broken into small kind of bite-size rules. So for example, lesson 1, which really looks into kind of the strategy and the high-level drivers of urban farming. It's broken up into 6 modules. So yeah, small bite-sized modules, easy to digest information. So we cover that, the high-level strategies. We dive into the economics for a profitable farming business. As I mentioned before, Javid, our director of consulting and lead systems design, has several units about comparing, greenhouses versus vertical farms from a technological point of view. What are the different systems of production for your crop? So you learn about the different production systems, NFT versus deep water culture, etc. Then here's my lesson on understanding your market and choosing your crop. And this is really critical, as we mentioned before. And then a little bit on more complex climate control strategies and HVAC studies. Our systems engineer, Alberto, goes into HVAC and how to kind of understanding how important it is to maintain the appropriate climate and the challenges to doing that in a greenhouse or vertical farm. And then finally, we have a lesson about organic. Is organic right for your CEA farm? And sort of the pros and cons to consider when considering that the organic route. So that is our kind of basic lessons. And that was, all these lessons were part of a commercial urban farming class that Agritecture conducted in person for many years when we had an office in New York City. So we had thousands of people actually attend that class in person, and then we decided to digitize it. We've also added some advanced lessons, 4 different modules that cover several different topics. So hopefully you guys will check out our software and explore those as well. Now, the next step when using our software is to create farm models. Now, the farm models, there are 2 ways to create our models, and you can create sort of unlimited numbers of models. Excuse me while this is but as you'll see, once this loads, I have created a ton of projects in Agritecture Designer. So you can see you can create unlimited number of models. So let's create a new model right now. And when you create a new model, you can choose from either a basic or advanced. Now, depending on your type of subscription, the basic model is available in both our Lite and Pro subscription types. The advanced modeling is only available in the Pro plan. So I'm going to show you the advanced because it's a little more interesting. So let's since there's someone here from Cleveland, let's model a farm in Cleveland. So we'll call this project, we'll say Cleveland greenhouse farm, and we'll just say basil. I like to include the location, the type of project, and the crop I'm growing in my title, just to make it easier to actually find the projects when I'm looking through my list of projects. Now, the first thing you're going to do here is put in your location for your farm, and this is critical. This is going to pull the relevant climate data for your location. And so when we run our model, especially for greenhouse projects, the local climate is going to heavily influence the expenses relating to cooling and heating. And so having an accurate location for your project when you're modeling is very important. Okay, so I'm going to model a greenhouse. You can also model a vertical farm or a container farm. I'm going to model a greenhouse. It's going to ask you about automation level. And I suggest when you're using our software to run different scenarios. I generally start with kind of a medium scenario, but this is essentially based on your selection here. It's going to kind of change the balance of labor versus CapEx. So if it's low automation, right, the CapEx is going to be on the smaller end. The amount of labor required is going to be higher. If you choose a highly automated facility, the CapEx is likely going to be very high. The amount of labor required will be lower. You can change the currency, change from feet to meters, pounds to kilos, etc. But we'll just leave those as they are for now. The site area, you can, if you own the site area, that's what you'll check. If you're looking to buy or looking to rent, then it'll ask you for a cost and the size of your space. So let's say owned, and let's say we'll say a 1 hectare, approximately 1 hectare site area. So it's about 107,000 square feet. And here, am I gonna, is the whole site going to be dedicated to the greenhouse area, or do I need space for circulation and parking, things like that? Do I need a head house for processing and cold storage, etc.? So I'm going to choose head house, but I'm going to assume that parking, etc., can be in another location. And now I'm going to choose my crops. So I'm going to choose, since I put basil at the beginning, I'm going to choose Genovese basil. Now, the grow systems that appear here, I'm not sure if they're showing up, but several grow systems appear, and only the ones that are relevant for that crop will be shown. Let's say this is 100%. And we do also have crop varieties on here. So if I add a new crop, I'm just going to show this for demonstration. Hopefully you guys can see this. You can see all the different varieties of, for example, if you choose lettuce, we have about 35 different lettuce varieties that you can model in our software. So we're going back to have our basil. The insulation level is essentially what type of greenhouse, light duty, medium duty, or heavy duty. In Cleveland, we know the winters are cold, so we're going to need either a medium or heavy duty. We're going to start out with a medium duty. And then will we need these other things? Will we need heating? Will we need supplemental lighting? Will we need CO2 injection? So definitely we're going to need heating in the winter in Cleveland. We'll need some supplemental lighting in the winter as well. And CO2 injection. CO2 will help your crop grow faster. And the beauty of this software is you can play around with these settings. You can run different scenarios, see how turning these things off or on will affect the production of your crop. All right, will I act as the head grower? I'm going to say no. We're going to hire a head grower, and this gives a suggested salary for your location. This value can be overridden, but we'll just leave it as is. We also want to know about the grower experience, because the grower experience will influence the amount of wastage in your production. So I'm going to say we have a highly experienced grower. Also going to ask you about what's your labor rate. We're going to need to hire some folks for this facility. What's the labor rate that's appropriate for that location? Or if you have certain goals around a wage that you're going to be paying, a living wage type of thing, you can adjust this to be appropriate. How is your project going to be financed? Is it going to be debt? Are you getting a loan? What's the interest rate and the repayment period? Is it equity? Is there an investment coming, or are you funding it yourself? So these questions are critical to your operation. Let's say we're getting a loan from the USDA. Let's say 5%. It's probably higher now with the higher interest rates, but I'm not sure. We'll say 15 years. And then these values around cost of water, cost of electricity, cost of natural gas are pulled from our database, but it's critical that these things are accurate, especially the electricity and the natural gas cost, as well as the labor rate, because those can have a big influence on your OPEX. So let's see. So I fill out all the fields and then I hit see results.
Moment of truth.
The moment of truth. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so when I talk with folks who are using our software, I tell them that there are 3 steps, or 3 very important steps to this. The first is running your model, as we just did. So that was the first step, but that's going to give you data that's may or not be perfectly specific to your farm. So you need to revise, you need to go through this pro forma that our software has built with a fine tooth comb, but to make sure it's accurate. So for example, it gives you an overview of your operating summary. right? This looks like a very profitable. You have a very short payback period, 1 year, which may not be realistic. So that's why we need to check all these things. But you have operating summary, tells you the amount of jobs you're creating, some other metrics around your maximum annual yield, how much energy you're using, how much water, the amount of bed space, etc. So this is your overview, your operating summary. Then it also provides you with a CapEx breakout, which we'll get into in a sec, OpEx breakout, and annual summary. Now, one thing that's critical to check at the beginning is your crop pricing. So this pulled a default value of $12 per pound for basil, but you've gone ahead, you've done your market research, you've spoke to your potential buyers, and they said, well, you know what, we can't give you a price of $12. We really can only pay you $9.50 a pound. So this is why your market research is so critical, right? So I'm going to update this. Okay, and so our project is still looking quite favorable, but it's critical to have an appropriate price, a price that's accurate or realistic, or else your business model is not going to be realistic in general. So the first step is making sure this pricing is right, or at least realistic. Then you want to look at your CapEx items, right? So, and what Agritecture Designer really helps you do is understand the questions to ask and the potential costs. So we know that we're growing basil in an NFT system. We have about this much bed space, right? Now, what you can do at this stage is call a systems provider. You can call Crop King. You could call Am Hydro and say, hey, or you could contact them through our software, but say, hey, I want to build a greenhouse in Cleveland, Ohio. It's this size. What is going to be the cost for this, for the production system? I want to do an NFT production system. What's going to be the cost? They may say, okay, it's, $24 per area per square foot, or they give you a quote, right? So then you'll come in, you'll update this value, right? And you can go through that with all the different elements. This, our greenhouse model is modeled with HPS lighting. You may decide that you want to use LED lighting. LED lighting is going to be more expensive, but there also may be, numerous rebates involved because LED lighting is more energy efficient. So you can go ahead and get accurate information from equipment providers to really refine this model. So that's the CapEx. It'll go through all the different elements of the CapEx. All these places where you see a caret means you can open it up and get additional information, edit the information. We also have the OpEx. As I showed you before, OpEx for electricity, it's broken down. Water as well, break down the water use by the different roles in the production system. So how much water is going to plant biomass, how much estimate of how much water your employees will use just in, washing hands, bathroom, et cetera, cleaning of trays, flushing your reservoir system, your evaporative cooling system. All these things are critical to understand how much water is used. And then things like gas, natural gas for your heating, the amount of labor, the consumables, etc. So all these things, understanding all these, all the costs that go into your operation, very critical. And then it gives you an annual summary, 15-year summary for your operation. And then once you, find a model that you use, or that run many scenarios, we want you to try out different things in our software. But once you have a model that you really like, then it's time to reach out to our partner network. We have certain equipment and financing partners, which can help get your project up and running. And we'd encourage you to, once you're ready to do that, you can reach out to Nadeem on our team, get in touch with him, and we can help connect you to the relevant suppliers, equipment, or financing to really get your project up and running and get your journey into CEA to be a reality. So I will stop there and wondering if there might be any questions.
There were a few questions in the chat, in the Q&A, David, that I answered already, but let me just pull back up my screen to finish us off.
Actually, we want to remind folks this is a webinar sponsored by Indoor Icon, so we have a discount code for you.
There it is. So if you are very much looking to understand the industry, your role in it, and are pursuing even building an operation, highly encourage you to look at the agenda for Indoor AgCon this March 11th and 12th, 2024 in Las Vegas. It is a great industry event. You can meet tons of different vendors, entrepreneurs, equipment providers that are active in the space. David and myself have both attended. I was there this past year, great experience, and our team will be there again next year. Going into, so there are two questions in the chat. I'll answer the first one, and David, maybe you can answer the second one. So Agritecture Designer, the courses themselves are in English. The software itself is built in English, but there should be a translation feature that allows you to auto-translate into other languages. And then related to costs, David, I think you're best to answer that one.
Yeah, so if you can look at our plans page, but generally there's two different subscription plans. We have the Lite and the Pro. The Lite is, I believe, $29 a month, and the Pro is $149 a month. We do offer a 1-week free trial to any users, so you can go ahead and set up a free trial. You'll get access, I believe, to all the to the Pro plan for 1 week. You can test it out and see if you like it. So yeah, I encourage folks to, hopefully you will try out our software. And what language, I know someone asked about different languages. Is there a specific language request? If that person could put it in the chat, that would be great.
French.
Okay, French. So all our videos, or at least I believe the majority of our videos have closed captioning associated with them. And if there is a specific language, I think we may be able to add it using AI pretty easily, an AI translation system. So it may not be a perfect translation, but we may be able to do that. So yeah, something to look out for.
Dave, there's a question about data and info from clients collected and processed by AI for the benefit of the user.
So we don't do anything with user data. So your data, the projects you create in your account, those are yours. We only look at those if you reach out to us and say, hey, I have a problem with a specific model. Or you say, I built this model. Often we have clients who say, I've built this model. This is the one that I want to, turn into reality. Can you look at it? Can you help me sort of like translate this model, communicate the what's in it to vendors, et cetera, et cetera. But that's the only reason why we would look at the models that you've created. And we don't have any currently, there's no AI integration into the software at all. But something we may consider in the future as a way to help get users, for example, more accurate crop pricing, et cetera, things like that.
All right, well, if there are no other questions, we can leave it at here. Both my email and David's email are on the slide featured here. If you have any further questions, we'd love to speak with you. If you're considering the software, we'd love to speak with you. And we're here to help. So thank you all for taking the time today to join us wherever you might be. We really appreciate it, and we hope to speak with you soon.